"You're hurt badly," Ethan said quietly, "but I can help you heal. I promise." She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that healing was impossible, that the Dominion had taken everything from her, her home, her family, her future. But when she tried to speak, her voice broke again, and she couldn't finish. Ethan didn't push. He just nodded, his eyes gentle. For hours, he worked in silence, letting her rest between small treatments. He gave her water, soft food, and encouragement. Every time she looked at him, she felt a strange emotion, unfamiliar and confusing, trust, and fear, and hope. "You don't have to do anything yet," he said at one point, noticing her trembling. "Just stay with me. That's enough for now." Virex's thoughts swirled. She had always believed that survival was meaningless, that resistance and hope were punishments disguised as virtues. But this human, he didn't judge her. He didn't demand obedience. He only offered presence, warmth, and care. Days passed. Virexa could walk again, though her steps were weak and uncertain. Her body ached from the harsh desert, and her mind still replayed the horrors of the Dominion's prison. But every time she wanted to give up, Ethan was there, calm, patient, steady. One evening, after she had eaten and the ship's engines hummed quietly in the background, she finally spoke. "Why? Why are you helping me?" Her voice was small, uncertain. Ethan looked at her, tired but kind. "Because I don't believe anyone should be left to suffer alone," he said simply. "Because you deserve a chance. And because someone has to stand up when others fall." Virexa had never heard words like that spoken to her. She had never been given a choice, never been offered protection without conditions. She wanted to distrust him, but something deep inside whispered that maybe she could believe him. Night fell on the barren moon, and for the first time in months, Virexa felt safe enough to sleep. Not fully, not peacefully, but enough to let go for a moment. Ethan sat nearby, keeping watch. She dreamt of her home, not as it had been, but as it could have been, peaceful, full of life, where voices mattered and hope could survive. The memory hurt, but it also reminded her that she was still alive. When she woke, Ethan was still there, offering a smile and soft words. "Good morning," he said. "How's my patient today?" Virexa didn't answer at first. She only looked at him, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years stirring inside. Gratitude, maybe even trust, and for the first time since, the Dominion had abandoned her. Virexa realized something. She might survive this. Not because she was strong enough to fight the Empire, not because she had power or weapons, but because one human had chosen not to turn away, in the endless desert of that forsaken moon. Among the scorching sun and the biting cold, a fragile seed began to grow. Hope to be continued. The days on the desert moon passed slowly. Virexa had learned how to move without collapsing, how to drink water without spilling it, how to eat the small rations Ethan provided. Each task felt like climbing a mountain, but she did it anyway. Her body ached constantly, reminders of the torture she had endured. But Ethan never complained, never scolded, never rushed her. Ethan spoke to her softly while he worked, explaining everything he did. When he cleaned her wounds, he told her which burns were dangerous and which would heal with time. When he helped her stretch her stiff muscles, he showed her how to move without pain. Every small act of care was a lesson. Every word he spoke was a bridge to a world she had thought lost. "You're doing well," he said one morning. "Better than I expected. You're stronger than you know." Virexa wanted to tell him he was wrong. She was weak, broken, worthless. But she only nodded, afraid her voice would betray her. It had been months since anyone had spoken to her without anger or threat, and she did not trust her own emotions. At night she slept in the small cabin of Ethan's ship. Sometimes she woke screaming from dreams of chains, dark cells, and cold water dripping on her face. Ethan never tried to silence her or dismiss her fears. He simply stayed close, offering a hand or a comforting word. "You're safe," he would whisper. "I'm right here." And slowly, she began to believe him. The human's presence was unlike anything Virexa had known. The Dominion had used fear as a weapon, pain as control, silence as obedience. Ethan used kindness differently. He offered patience instead of punishment, encouragement instead of threats. He offered a choice. That simple act, being allowed to decide for herself, was more powerful than any weapon she had seen one day. While Ethan was repairing a small engine outside, Virexa tried something new. She picked up a tool he had left on the table and mimicked his movements. It was clumsy at first. She dropped it twice and cursed herself under her breath. But Ethan watched, smiling. "You've got it," he said. "Don't be afraid to make mistakes." She laughed quietly, a sound that startled her more than the pain ever had. It felt strange to laugh, to feel a small moment of joy after so much suffering. She realized that maybe she could survive this. Maybe she could even live. As days turned into weeks, Virex's mind began to heal in small, almost invisible ways. She asked questions. She learned Ethan's routines. She observed the small world of his ship, the stars passing by outside, the quiet hum of engines that never shouted or demanded. And for the first time, she began to imagine a life beyond pain, but shadows still lingered. Memories of the Dominion haunted her. Every sudden noise, every shadow in the cabin, made her flinch. She hated her own reactions, the way fear still ruled her body. She hated how dependent she felt on Ethan, how much she wanted his protection, even though she knew she could never repay it. Ethan noticed. One night, as they watched the white moonlight spill across the deck, he said softly, "You don't have to repay me. You just have to survive. That's enough." Virexa wanted to argue. She wanted to say she did not deserve help, that her life was worthless. But she only nodded. Words failed her, as they always did. Something shifted that night. A small spark, fragile but stubborn, grew inside her chest. It whispered that she could trust, that she could hope, that she could fight for herself, not against others, but against the despair that had tried to claim her completely. Ethan's presence was no longer just comfort. It was a lifeline. It was proof that not all beings in the galaxy were cruel, that compassion could exist even in a universe filled with violence. And slowly, Virexa began to believe that maybe she was more than the scars, more than the numbers the Dominion had assigned her. She looked at him and realized something terrifying and wonderful. She cared about this human, not as a tool or protector, not as someone to obey, but as a person. Someone who had risked everything for her, even though she was nothing. And for the first time, Virexa made a silent vow to herself. She would not waste this gift. She would not let the Dominion's cruelty define the rest of her life. She would survive. She would live. And maybe, one day, she would fight back, not just for herself, but for everyone the Dominion had tried to break in the quiet of the ship. With the stars stretching endlessly outside, Virexa took a deep, shaky breath. She was still alive, And that was the first victory she had ever known to be continued. The quiet that had filled the ship shattered one afternoon. A warning alarm blared, harsh and urgent. Virexa bolted upright, heart hammering in her chest. The sun outside had burned white over the desert moon. But now the sky seemed darker, heavy with danger. Ethan ran to the control panel, his hands moving quickly over buttons and screens. "They found us," he said, voice tight. "The Dominion patrol. They're on their way." Virex's stomach twisted. The Dominion. After all she had suffered, after everything they had done, they had tracked her here. She wanted to hide, to curl into herself, to pretend she did not exist, but she could not move fast enough, could not escape the fear that tightened its grip around her chest when the ships appeared in orbit. Huge and menacing, she felt her body go rigid. Their markings were unmistakable, black and silver, cold and perfect. The patrol vessels were equipped for destruction, and now, she realized, they were coming for her and for Ethan. "They want her," one of the Dominion officers said when they hailed the ship. His voice was calm, cold. There was no mercy in it. "Return the subject immediately. She belongs to us." Ethan did not answer. He turned to Virexa, his eyes steady. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. "I won't let them take you." Virexa wanted to protest, to tell him to leave, to save himself, but she could not. Something in his calm, unwavering stance made her want to trust him fully. For the first time, she felt a small spark of courage. The Dominion's boarding ship docked roughly, and soldiers poured in, weapons raised. Virex's pulse raced. She remembered the prison, the chains, the endless darkness. She remembered the screams of those who had not survived. Her body tensed to flee, but Ethan stood in front of her, unarmed. Facing the soldiers, "She belongs to herself," he said, his voice quiet but filled with steel. The officer sneered. "You would die for her." "Yes," Ethan said without hesitation. It was a simple word, but it carried more weight than any weapon. Humans were strange, unpredictable creatures. They did not fight like the Dominion. They fought with stubbornness, with unbreakable will. And in that moment, Virexa saw it clearly. He would not give up, even against impossible odds. The fight that followed was brutal. Ethan moved with determination, using everything he had at his disposal. His body was injured, his hands scraped and bleeding, but he did not falter. Each time a Dominion soldier advanced, he blocked, dodged, and countered, protecting Virexa. Virexa wanted to help, wanted to fight back, but her body still trembled with weakness. Instead, she watched, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. She had never seen anyone risk so much for her, never. When backup arrived, it was human ships responding to Ethan's emergency call. The Dominion soldiers froze as more and more vessels appeared in orbit. Suddenly, their advantage disappeared. They realized too late that they had underestimated the humans' resolve. The Dominion commander stepped back, fury twisting his face. "This is impossible," he spat. "She is ours." "She's not yours," Ethan shouted, limping toward the... "She is alive, and she is free. You do not get to decide her fate." Virexa felt something swell inside her chest. Fear, yes, but also pride. She had survived the Dominion, but not alone. This human had risked everything to protect her. His courage, his stubbornness. His compassion, it had given her life again. The Dominion realized their defeat and retreated, leaving the desert moon and its small ship behind. Silence returned. broken only by the faint hum of engines and the soft wind across the stone. Viraxa collapsed into the blankets, exhausted, her body trembling from adrenaline, fear, and relief. Ethan knelt beside her, checking her wounds gently. "It's over. For now," he said. "You're safe. I promise." For the first time, Viraxa truly believed it. She closed her eyes, letting the tension of weeks' months drain from her in that quiet moment. She understood something profound. Survival was no longer just about herself. It was about the choice someone had made to fight for her, to risk everything. And in that choice, she found a spark of hope, fragile but undeniable. The Dominion had thought they had power over her. They had thought they could erase her existence. But they had not counted on humanity. They had not counted on Ethan, and that made all the difference. To be continued. The desert moon had grown quiet. The Dominion ships were gone, retreating into the void, but the weight of their presence lingered in Virax's chest. She sat on the floor of Ethan's small cabin, staring at the stars through the viewport, trying to breathe without panic. Each breath reminded her of the pain she had endured, each heartbeat of the fear that had haunted her for months. Ethan moved around the cabin with calm efficiency, repairing equipment and preparing supplies. Every now and then, he glanced at her, offering a small smile. "You're doing better today," he said softly. "Your body is healing faster than I expected." Viraxa didn't respond. Healing was not what she thought about. Healing was temporary. Pain could always return. Fear could always return. And the Dominion. They had left scars deeper than anything medicine could touch. But then Ethan sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "You know," he said quietly, "you don't have to decide anything right now. Not about what happens next, not about trusting me. You just have to survive today." She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something she had not felt in a long time: safety. Not the kind that shields you from danger completely, but the kind that allows you to breathe even when the world is broken. She wanted to recoil from it, afraid to hope again. But a tiny spark inside whispered that maybe she could. Days turned into weeks as Ethan helped her rebuild strength. They scavenged food and water from the desert, repaired his ship, and talked quietly about small things: the stars, the planets they passed, the silence between words. Viraxa began to speak too, haltingly at first, her voice fragile, then a little stronger. She asked questions about humans, about Earth, about life beyond the Dominion. And Ethan answered patiently, without judgment. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said one evening, as the two of them watched the twin moons rise over the cracked horizon. "I'm not the Dominion. I won't ever force you to do something you don't want to do." Viraxa felt tears sting her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but the thought felt alien, almost dangerous. Freedom had been a word she had never truly known. She had been punished, controlled, erased. And now, someone was offering her a choice. A choice it was terrifying. Weeks passed, and the bond between them grew quietly, unspoken yet undeniable. Ethan's actions spoke louder than words. He protected her, cared for her, never judged her, and never demanded obedience. And for the first time, Viraxa realized that life could exist beyond survival, beyond chains, beyond pain. One day, after a long trek to collect water from a distant cavern, she sat with Ethan on the ship's deck, staring at the stars. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why did you help me? I am nothing. I have nothing left." Ethan looked at her, tired but steady. "Because someone has to care. because letting you die would be a choice I couldn't live with, and because you're alive, Virexa. That alone makes a difference." His words hit her harder than any blow the Dominion had dealt. Alive, that was all she needed to be, he said. Not perfect, not whole, not free from fear, just alive. Virexa finally understood that freedom was not a cage. Freedom was the ability to choose, even when the choice was scary. She could stay, leave, trust, or run. No one would force her. No one would control her. And for the first time, she realized that her life could belong to her. "I want to try," she said finally, voice trembling but determined. "I want to live. Not just survive. I want to live." Ethan smiled, relief and pride shining in his eyes. "Then we'll do it together," he said. "Step by step. No rush, no chains. Just life." For the first time since the Dominion had thrown her into the void, Virexa felt something like hope bloom inside her chest. Not fear, not pain, not despair. And with that hope came a promise to herself. She would not waste this chance. She would learn, she would grow, and she would face the galaxy on her own terms. Later, as the twin moons set and the sun's harsh lights began to burn the horizon again, Virexa stood on the deck with Ethan beside her. She lifted her head, feeling the wind against her scars, the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the quiet hum of the ship beneath her feet. The galaxy was wide, dangerous, unforgiving. But now, she had choice, and with that choice came power, the power to decide her own fate. To be continued. Virexa stood on the observation deck of Ethan's ship, the stars stretching endlessly before her. She had survived the Dominion. She had endured torture, abandonment, and despair. She had crawled across a desert moon, thinking no one cared, and yet, here she was, alive, stronger than she had ever imagined. Her blue skin still bore the scars of the prison. Her body still ached from wounds that would never fully heal, but her spirit was no longer chained. She had been broken, yes, but she had been rebuilt not by herself, not entirely, but by someone who had refused to turn away. Ethan had risked everything for her. He had offered her something the Dominion could never give: choice, safety, trust, a chance to live on her own terms. In the weeks and months that followed, the ship traveled beyond the desert moon, beyond the edge of Dominion-controlled space. Virexa learned to operate the ship, to read star maps, to fix systems that had lain dormant for decades. She discovered the freedom of decision, small choices at first, like which route to take or how to repair a console. And later, bigger choices: where to go, who to trust, what kind of life she wanted to lead. Every night, she would watch the stars and remember what the Dominion had tried to teach her: that she was nothing, that she belonged to no one, that her existence was meaningless. And every night, she would whisper the truth to herself: I am alive. I matter. My life is mine. Ethan never demanded thanks. He never expected anything from her. He simply reminded her, gently, that survival was worth more than fear, and that sometimes the bravest thing a being could do was care for another. The human way, Virexa realized, was not about conquest or domination. It was about standing up when others fell. It was about risking everything for someone who had been abandoned. It was about proving that one life could matter, even against an empire that had tried to erase her. One day, as they passed a bustling trade station on the edge of known space, a holographic news feed flickered across the main screen. The story was brief but powerful, reports of Dominion atrocities, testimonies from survivors, and a small, defiant note from a young alien who had refused to be silenced. Virexa paused, recognizing her own words in the broadcast. She had shared her story, her scars, and her truth. The galaxy would remember, and not because of weapons or fleets, but because she had survived, because someone had refused to leave her behind. She turned to Ethan, who was quietly monitoring the ship. "Do you think the Dominion will ever come back?" she asked. He shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "Maybe, but it won't matter. You're alive, Virexa, and that makes all the difference." She nodded, letting the words sink in. Alive, free, not a number, not a subject, not a pawn in an empire's game. Alive for the first time. She felt the weight of hope not as a burden, but as a shield. The galaxy was still dangerous. There were still empires and soldiers and warships, but she was no longer the scared, broken girl thrown into the void. She was someone who had been chosen to survive, someone who had been given a chance to rewrite her own story, and she would. Years passed. Virexa and Ethan traveled the stars together, helping those who... They did not call her by her real name anymore. Names meant history. Names meant identity. An identity was dangerous, so the Dominion erased it. They called her Subject V13 as cold metal cuffs locked around her thin wrists. The corridor lights above flickered as she was dragged across the floor of the orbital prison. Every step hurt. Her legs were weak from days without rest, but the guards did not slow down. She had once stood in halls like these with pride. Now she was cargo. Virexa had been a junior strategist in the Carvel Dominion, a powerful alien empire feared across many star systems. She was young, curious, and most dangerous of all. She believed in justice. When she saw data reports about destroyed villages and missing civilians, she asked questions. When her superiors ordered silence, she spoke louder. She said the wars were wrong, she said. Weaker worlds deserved protection. She said power without mercy would destroy them. All that others listened. That was her crime. The first torture session lasted 6 hours. The second lasted longer. They did not always use pain. Sometimes they used isolation, leaving her alone in darkness until her thoughts turned against her. Sometimes they showed her recordings of ruined planets and told her it was her fault. "You inspired resistance," they said calmly. "This is the result." She screamed until her voice failed. Then she cried. Then she went silent. Silence pleased them. Weeks passed, or maybe months. Time had no meaning inside the cell. Her blue skin was covered in burns and deep scars. One of her horns had been broken during interrogation and never healed properly. She stopped asking why. She stopped hoping anyone would come. Hope hurt too much. Finally, one day, the cell door opened without warning. High-ranking officers entered. Clean uniforms. Empty eyes. "You are no longer useful," one of them said. Virexa lifted her head slowly. Her vision was blurred, but she understood those words. Execution. She thought, she almost felt relieved, but they surprised her again. Instead of the execution chamber, they loaded her onto a small transport ship. No medical aid. No explanation. The ship jumped through hyperspace only once before landing. They threw her out. Literally, she hit the ground hard, gasping as pain shot through her body. Fine red dust filled her lungs. The The transport lifted off immediately, its engines screaming as it vanished into the sky. She was alone. The planet, if it could even be called, that was a dead desert moon. Cracked stones stretched endlessly in every direction. No plants, no water, no signs of life. Above her, a harsh white sun burned without mercy. They had not exiled her. They had sentenced her to die slowly. Virexa tried to crawl after the ship, even though she knew it was pointless. Her fingers dug into the hot ground, skin tearing, but she did not stop until her strength gave out. She collapsed face first into the dust. The heat was unbearable. Her body trembled. Her mind drifted between painful memories and empty darkness. So this is how it ends, she thought. Not as a rebel, not as a hero, just forgotten. As night fell, the temperature dropped suddenly. Her body shook violently. She curled into herself, trying to protect what little warmth she had left. The stars above were cruelly beautiful, bright and distant. She wondered if anyone would ever know what happened to her. She wondered if her words had mattered at all. A weak sound escaped her throat, half a laugh, half a sob. I was right, she whispered to the empty world, and it destroyed me. Her eyes slowly closed, far above the surface. Something unseen changed course. A small ship detected a faint, broken life sign, and for the first time since her chains were locked on, fate hesitated to be continued. The desert moon was a cruel place. The sand was sharp, jagged, like broken glass under her hands and knees. The wind howled across the barren land, carrying dust and tiny stones that cut at her skin. The sun above beat down relentlessly, burning her pale blue skin until it ached. Nights were worse. The temperature dropped so low that her teeth chattered, and she could not stop shaking. The moon seemed alive, punishing her for daring to survive. Virexa dragged herself forward, each movement exhausting her. Her muscles screamed, her back burned from scars that had never healed properly, and her lungs were raw from the dust she breathed. She could barely remember what it felt like to stand. Her body was weak, her spirit nearly broken, and her mind wandered in and out of memories that hurt more than the present. She remembered her homeworld, the proud towers of Carvel, the stars that shone above the city like a crown. She remembered the voices of those she had loved, the ones who had taught her right from wrong. And she remembered the war rooms where she had argued, begged, shouted even, for mercy. She remembered the fear in others' eyes when she spoke truth, the hope that had blossomed in secret. That hope had been crushed. Now she was nothing, a body left to rot, a spirit abandoned to darkness. She wanted to close her eyes forever. She wanted to stop feeling the burning in her chest, the hunger gnawing at her stomach, the cold that made her bones ache. She whispered a farewell to herself, but the universe had not finished with her yet. On the third night, as she lay half buried in the cracked stone, staring at stars that seemed too distant to care, a faint hum filled the air. At first, she thought it was the wind, but it was steady, rhythmic, unlike anything she had heard before. It grew louder. Her body tensed. Fear crawled up her spine, sharper than any scar. A shadow passed over her face. Something large was moving above. She squinted against the white moonlight, shielding her eyes. She could not make out the shape at first, but it moved with purpose, descending slowly, deliberately. The object touched the ground with a soft thud, and a hatch opened. A ramp extended to the surface. Virex's heart raced in a way she had not felt for a long time. Curiosity, hope, fear, all at once. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp. Human. She had seen humans before, in Dominion reports. They were primitive, fragile, stubborn. She had been taught to despise them. Yet the figure that now looked down at her did not radiate hostility. There was something else in his eyes, shock, yes, but also concern. He approached slowly. Virexa tried to move away, but her body barely responded. Her hands scraped against the harsh stone as she pulled herself backward. The human stopped a few meters away, raising his hands. No weapons. No threat. Hey. You're alive, he said, voice soft, almost a whisper. Stay with me, okay? Virexa blinked. Alive. She barely felt alive. She had not expected kindness in months, not since the Dominion's walls had closed around her. She flinched instinctively, expecting pain. But none came. The human knelt beside her. His hands were warm, gentle. He moved slowly, careful not to frighten her further. I won't hurt you, he said. I promise. The word promise sounded foreign in her ears. Promises had never existed for her. They had been broken, twisted, or used as weapons. And yet, there was something in his tone that made her pause. Something that made the frost around her heart crack, just slightly. Her mind screamed to distrust him. Every instinct trained by years of pain told her to run, to hide, to curl into herself and wait for the end. But a tiny spark so small she almost missed. It whispered that, maybe, just maybe, this human was different. She tried to speak, to tell him to leave, but her throat was dry, her words failing. The human smiled faintly, a gesture that seemed almost unreal in this barren world. Take your time, he said. I'll be right here. You don't have to do anything yet. For the first time since she had been abandoned, Virexa let herself breathe. Not fully, not yet, but enough to feel that maybe the universe had not completely forgotten her. Above them, the stars shone indifferently. The wind still cut across the desert, still whispered its cruel warnings. But down on the cracked ground, two beings, a broken alien girl and a human stranger, faced the night together, and somewhere deep inside her, Virexa felt a flicker of something long lost. Hope to be continued. Virexa could barely lift her head when the human reached her. The pain in her body was overwhelming, her skin raw from the desert, her muscles trembling from exhaustion. She wanted to push him away, to tell him to leave. But something in the way he moved, slow and careful, stopped her. His eyes were full of concern, not fear, not judgment. She had not seen that look in years. My name's Ethan, he said softly, crouching beside her. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you. Safe. The word sounded strange. Dangerous, even. She had been told for so long that safety was a lie, that the galaxy was cruel and unyielding, that the only thing she could trust was pain. Yet this human, fragile, alone, and clearly far from any empire, spoke it like it was true. Virexa wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she was broken, that she was nothing, but her voice came out as a weak rasp. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. Instead, he gently lifted her into his arms. Despite her fear and weakness, she noticed how careful he was, cradling her like she was made of glass. He carried her to the ship that had landed on the moon. Inside, it was warm and dimly lit. There were no harsh lights like in the Dominion cells, no cold metal walls, no instruments designed to hurt. Just a small space filled with quiet hums and soft shadows. Ethan laid her on a bed of blankets that smelled faintly of oil and machinery. He cleaned her wounds with careful hands, applying bombs and bandages. Virexa flinched at every touch. Pain had become her language. Kindness felt foreign and frightening.